Call the meeting to order. We'll start by seating alternates. And I'll seat Kate for Jim Fitzgerald. And that means we have 4 people and we have a quorum. So if the only other person that may be here is Joe Gareis, and if he does show up, then we'll see him. Okay, so I guess I'd like to start by welcoming our 2 new members, Maria and Kate, welcome. I'm assuming you're both sworn in?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, next thing on the agenda is to adopt or revise the agenda. Any suggested changes to the agenda is published. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is resignations and replacement. I'd like to start by reading a letter from Alesia Kennerson to myself. Ben, as you know, I've recently won a seat on the Hartford Board of Selectmen during the November 2011 election. As such, I cannot be seated on both boards and must regrettably vacate my seat on the Board of Finance. I very much enjoyed being an active member of the Board of Finance and look forward to a time when I may be fortunate enough to serve again. Please consider my resignation to be effective on 11/21/11. She also said that she planned on being here tonight to kind of see us off in person, but she lost her voice. I can't imagine Alesia without her voice. So that's been that. Joe is here. I'll seat Joe for Dan Charest, who also said he wasn't going to be here tonight. Okay, so that's the resignation. Regards to replacement, I have a letter that I would like to read from Jim Fitzgerald, Chairman of the New Hartford Republican Town Committee. And it says, "Dear Mr. Chairman, I kindly request that you present this letter and read it to the Board of Finance members and alter the seat at the meeting. As is customary, the Republican Town Committee of New Hartford is providing its submission and recommendation of the following registered Republicans. The first recommendation is to appoint immediately and, if acted on by the Board of Finance, and to seat, if appropriate, to fill the Republican seat vacated by the resignation of Ms. Alesia Kennerson, who is a newly elected position as Selectman Town of New Hartford. As this seat is a Republican vacancy and per the Connecticut State Statute, the New Hartford Republican Town Committee kindly recommends the immediate appointment to fill the regular Board of Finance, our member vacancy vacated by Alesia Kennerson, with Ms. Kate Rieger, Republican, current New Hartford Board of Finance Republican alternate. Second, the New Hartford Republican Town Committee is providing its submission and recommendation of Mr. William M. Cotes, a New Hartford registered Republican, to the appointment of the Republican alternate seat vacated by Ms. Kate Rieger, if vacated upon Ms. Rieger's successful appointment to the regular member's seat vacated by Alesia Kennerson. So, as this alternate seat is a Republican seat, and per the Connecticut State Statute, the New Hartford Republican Town Committee kindly recommends the immediate appointment of the Board of by the Board of Finance of Mr. William Cotes, New Hartford, to fill the vacant Board of Finance alternate seat. And he's got a bio for Mr. Cotes, but I thought I'd just maybe ask Bill if you just mind just reading your bio,
sure.
or just giving a once over however you'd like to do it.
Yeah, sure. My name's Bill Cotes, and I just wanted to say that I have a deep respect for the boards and commissions in town and the people who volunteer their personal time serving on behalf of residents and all taxpayers of New Hartford. I enjoy donating my personal time to New Hartford and currently serve on the Stancliff Cove Board. I've been a resident of New Hartford since 2003. I was raised in Canton and attended the Canton Public School System. I earned a BA in History from Providence College and an MS in Accounting from the University of Hartford. I'm a registered Republican, reside at 42 Beanie Road with my wife Beth and 2 children, Colin and Audrey, ages 10 and 7. I have in-depth financial experience, serving 14 years with the state of Connecticut, most recently the last 8 as a tax auditor for the Department of Revenue Services. Most recently, I've spent the past 6 years of my career with United Technologies Corporation and currently serve as manager of tax. I believe my life work experience will benefit the Board of Finance and the entire community of New Hartford in adding value to the financial business undertakings on behalf of the town within the Board of Finance. I'm interested in an appointment to fill a Republican vacancy and to serve on the New Hartford Board of Finance for the town of New Hartford, Connecticut. I appreciate your consideration.
Okay, well, right now, at the moment, we have one vacancy, and that's the regular member. And just as a reminder, it's up to this board to vote on who they choose to have as the regular replacement for Alesia's position. So do we have any nominations for that replacement? Reggie?
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Kay Rieger to place Alesia Kennerson's regular seat on the Board of Finance.
Second. Okay. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll move we close nominations.
I'll make a motion to close nominations.
Second. All in favor of closing?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Any discussion? We've got one candidate. I can't imagine a whole lot of discussion, but we'll move it to a vote unless somebody has something they want to say. Hearing nothing. All in favor of Kate in that position?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Now that Kate has been appointed, I would recommend that she be sworn in, and then we'll move to the alternate seat, because now that Kate has moved, I don't know whether her vote would count till she's sworn in.
Her vote would count as sworn in, but she is sworn in as an alternate now. We can do that.
Conveniently have
We
Commissioner
can-
of the Court here.
If you want to swear them in tonight, we can swear them both in at the same
Right.
time, assuming Mr. Cotes is the one that's appointed, or we can swear them in one at a time, or what, whatever your pleasure.
I'd be happy to swear them both in when the time is right.
Okay. So, now we have a alternate seat that's been vacated, and again, it's the up to the Board of Finance to select an alternate. We have the recommendation from the Republican Town Committee. Do I have any nominations?
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Bill Cotes to fill Kate Rieger's alternate seat on the New Hartford Board of Finance.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Are there any other nominations?
Could we have discussion, or
Sorry?
could there be some discussion as to the
Sure.
alternate position?
I want to close nominations first if there are any other nominations. Hearing no other nominations, can I have a motion to close nominations?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor of closing nominations?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. So we have one nomination. Any discussion?
Yes, please. I emailed you this afternoon, I think it was like 4:11, so you may not have seen it. And I think you're a wonderful candidate, I really do. I didn't know who was going to be presented, but if I could read my email to you, and then if it could be considered or not,
Sure.
it's fine. So I'd like to ask you to consider appointing a non-Republican to the alternate position, which will open up this evening after one of the 2 alternates moves into Alesia's vacated position. This would rebalance the board so that when a Republican is absent from a meeting, his or her position is taken by a Republican or an unaffiliated alternate, and when a Democrat is absent, his or her place is taken by a Democrat or an unaffiliated alternate. In the case of an absence of an unaffiliated board member, such as myself, he or she would be replaced by a member of the party that sponsored them in the election or by an unaffiliated alternate. I believe this is how the town's boards and commissions have always handled the matter of alternates. In this past election, the Republicans took the very unusual step of running 2 candidates for the alternate positions on the Board of Finance, rather than abiding by the gentleman's agreement of running only 1 candidate each, so the result would be that 1 alternate of each of the major parties would be elected. I understand this is not a statutory requirement, but rather a time-honored gentleman's agreement, which helps establish an atmosphere of fair play among board members and leads to a more collaborative effort by all. This was addressed to you, and I wasn't sure of the procedure, so I said, if you do not feel comfortable making this decision on your own, I would like to propose that it be put to a vote by the Board of Finance members, and as always, the majority vote carries the day. Thank you for your consideration.
Well, what I would say is it's not my decision, it is the board's decision as to who the replacement would be. I want to point out one other thing, just so everyone understands. As you said, it's perfectly legal to have, if you have 2 alternates, if they both be from the same party. What we have to be mindful of is when we seat alternates, we can't seat any more than would allow the majority that we're allowed. For example, tonight, we have 4 Republicans seated, okay? If we had, let's just say, Jim Fitzgerald was here, and Dan Charest wasn't here, if we had 4 Republicans already, then we wouldn't be able to seat that Republican for an independent or a Democrat. However, we'll always be able to have a quorum. It's not gonna affect the quorum. I've looked into this, and we can have a quorum either way, so it's not gonna get in the way of our business. It's just a matter of who's gonna be seated. So that's my take on it. Reggie?
Do you have another candidate that you're recommending at this time?
Well, I obviously haven't canvassed the candidates, but the logical choice would be Bill Baxter, who was the Democratic candidate who did not get elected and would have been elected had there only been 1 Republican running for the seat.
But the electors of the community did vote, and not the
Oh, absolutely.
election stands as
Oh,
it
and
stands.
there's no, absolutely, there's no question about that. It just comes down to this, let's say, gentleman's agreement, where every board, every commission is very careful to be considerate of whichever the minority is on that, to be sure that there is 1 of each. I just wanted to bring that to your attention because it was brought to my attention.
I guess I would say that in this case, the Republicans, the town committee specifically targeted to go after 2 positions, so it was done with intention.
Yes, it was,
And
yes.
they were successful with it. It does leave a vacancy open, and while we have a recommendation from the RTC chair, it's really up to this board to fill it. Points understood. It will not affect us doing business. Rest assured, we still can operate fully with the recommendation that's on the table, let me say. But we have a nominee, and we have a second, and there are no other nominees, so I don't know what else to tell you, unless somebody wants to support you tabling that until another nominee comes forward, and that wouldn't be me. I'm not interested in doing that personally. I don't know if anybody else is, frankly.
It's out as a proposal. If anybody feels that they would like to support that, that would be great. If not, we'll go ahead with the election, with the vote.
Any other discussion or comments before we go ahead with a vote? Okay, hearing none, we'll go for a vote. All in favor? Mr. Cotes is alternate.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstention.
Abstain? One abstention. Okay. We can swear them in. If we swear them in now, if it just takes a second, we can do that. We might have to do some reseating to do that. Because Kate's seated as an alternate now.
You are correct.
Do you want to do it or want to move on? It's up to you.
I would ask that you swear them in, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Just a minute, I know that Brian Cotes.
We have a officer of the court here, I guess.
Commissioner Court, you do. I'll be happy to do it. It's a quick oath, so I don't think it'll take very long. I'll start with Kate first. Raise your right hand. Do you, Kate Rieger, solemnly swear that you will faithfully discharge, according to law, your duties as a regular member of the Board of Finance of the town of New Hartford to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I certainly do.
Okay. Bill? Do you, William Cotes, solemnly swear that you will faithfully discharge, according to law, your duties as a Board of Finance alternate member of the town of New Hartford to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I do.
Sworn.
Okay, welcome aboard.
Jump up.
Here's, okay, with that, Kate is now seated for Mr. Fitzgerald. She's seated on her own. And because of the minority rule, we will not seat anybody for Mr. Fitzgerald. We don't want to move forward, Republicans seated already. But you're more than welcome to take place in every bit of the conversations, okay, whether you're seated or not. All right. Next thing is approval of the minutes. I think we have a couple extra copies, maybe if anybody doesn't have any. Can I have a motion to, once you're satisfied with them, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve them, but if there's an amendment I want to make. I'll make the motion first to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a second to that motion? Some discussion, probably gonna be
Yeah,
on.
there's a section towards the bottom of the first page, when I was making recommendations to Mr. Dan Eddy. I believe what I had said roughly is that we needed to, or he should go back to his board, talk about the position that they wanted to take as far as the finances or whatever that you had been talking about that evening. And then what you need to do, based on what my experience is, you need to take that recommendation to the Board of Selectmen first, because you are under their budget. The Rec Commission is a department of the general government budget, which is under the control of the Board of Selectmen. However, I also said that I, as a member of the Board of Finance, whether at the meeting or anywhere else, I'll be glad to talk to you anytime about any financial concerns that the Rec Department have. I just want to make that clear, that it just, the Rec Department needs to talk to the Board of Selectmen, because Dan is the executive official in town, the Board of Selectmen is the executive board in town, and you're really under their control somewhat. I mean, you have your charter as, or the ordinance, but also you do work under them, basically. But other than that, if you want to talk about anything for, if the chairman allows it, that's fine with me as a member.
So, those don't sound like words for minutes.
I'm clarifying based on, you would ask me about it.
Yes.
So anyways, Member Smith suggested that Dan Eddy go back to the Rec Commission, prove his position for their financial request. Would that be correct, Dan?
Yeah, as best I recall, but I'm not privy to the minutes, so that's fine, yes,
There's
that
a
was,
copy here. I mean,
that
all
certainly
it says
seems to
here
be
is
the
Member
intent.
Smith suggested that Dan Eddy go back to the Rec Commission and approve his position as spokesman or spokesperson, and determine if the Rec Commission wants to sit down with the Board of Finance for next year's budget. There's
yeah, that's a little broader than what you
Yeah.
said.
Basically, make a decision as a Rec Commission, what you
Right.
wanna do, go talk to the Board of Selectmen.
Right,
If the Selectmen make a decision, to recommend an additional financing or add to the budget next year or include your recommendation in the budget, then they come to us. But you're always welcome to comment. Matter of fact, last year during the budget session, I had said several times in several meetings, where's the rec commission? Because I had some questions on the sewer or the septic system that you wanted to install, because I wasn't $25,000 that you had in the budget. I didn't feel that was sufficient to put in 2 septic systems up at Broden Park. And that's, the board as a whole voted to deny that based on the fact that we didn't think it was enough money. That's how that all came about.
Right, I understand.
I guess
Thank
the
you.
intention is not to stop the conversation, it's to make sure we go through that channel.
Correct.
But he can always talk to us too, but the selectmen, I believe, having been a first selectman, cannot be left out of the step because it's a selectmen's budget.
Well,
We
can
met,
just-
we
can
met
just-
last month.
Am I fine?
So are you saying just change the minutes to take out where it says Board of Finance and say Board of Selectmen?
That sounds like a good recommendation to,
Just,
to be simple.
That's a proper
I don't need to cut
presentation.
that big comment.
I was on a roll. There you go.
So the last sentence will read, wants to sit down with the Board of Selectmen for next year's budget.
Yes, change it to that.
If that was your intent.
That was my intent. And then we'll go from there, Dan.
Thank you.
All right.
So, any discussion about that amendment? Do you have a second to that amendment? Second. Okay. If there are no discussions, we'll vote on the amendment, then vote on the rest of the amendment. First, we'll vote on the amendment, see if there's anything else. Well, is there any other amendments to it? Let me start with that.
Well, on the last page, under bullet number 3, then under your comments there, I mean, should that refer to the meetings about the teachers' contract negotiations, just for clarity? It just talks about,
The Board of School, the Board of Finance have started.
that was about the contract negotiations,
The
right?
meeting between the New Hartford School Board and the NHEA have started, not Board of Finance. If you just change Board of Finance, the Board of Finance to NHEA, New Hartford
That would-
Educational
That
Association.
would clarify, yeah.
And can I just,
Yeah.
it's really not the New Hartford School Board, it's the New Hartford Board of Education.
Okay.
That's an educated part.
So I'm taking that as a motion.
Yes.
Do we have a second to
please.
that?
Second.
Okay. Any other amendments? I guess when we did it, we should vote on them separately. Can we, all in favor of this second amendment that Joe has raised? All in favor?
Fine.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, and then going back to the first amendment that Reggie made. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Anything else on the minutes? Okay, then let's vote on the minutes themselves. All in favor of the minutes? Amended?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, that's done. Opportunity for public to speak. Any public comments? Mr. Reddy?
Dan Eddy from the Rec Commission. Hopefully a very quick clarification of some of the points that were brought up at the last meeting. There was concern voiced about proper documentation for capital requests, and I went through our $91,000 budget for 11-12, Rec Commission's $91,000 budget for 11-12. And it seems to be very tight, which is appropriate. But should we need to put a roof on a cabin, there is no money in there to be able to do that. Should we need to, and I understand that my use of unallocated capital raised all kinds of red flags, and appropriately so, but how do we propose properly a way to fund, say, a study of a forester to designate dead trees that should come down? I walked around the park after the Brody South issue with dead trees and saw about a half a dozen trees that looked like they might be immediate dangers to society, but there's no funding and there's no mechanism for the rec, that I'm aware of, for the rec commission to put that kind of financial request in our budget. So I would just sort of need clarity to understand how this sum of money that may come up suddenly, a $2,000 repair to the parking lot. There is certainly no availability to redesignate funds within our existing $91,000 to fix a parking lot for an amount under the capitalization figure of 5,000.
Reggie, you raised your hand, did you wanna take that one, or?
If I just may ask a question, don't we have tree wardens in the town? Do we have more than one?
We have three.
Then why would we wanna pay for a study when we
We
have?
weren't, on the rec
tree wardens
commission,
For free.
well, on the rec commission, we've discussed the fact that we feel that
Did you talk to the
there are
selectmen about this?
some trees, we pointed it out, but no one ever came back and said that we have.
Did you talk to the
I wasn't
selectmen?
Yes.
There is at least a 34,000, if memory serves me correct, contracted services and maintenance budget within the rec department. that Mr. Eddy's
Had the
not,
selectmen and the rec
not
commission talked about these
broaching.
trees?
There is what, Dan? What are you saying?
within the rec commission budget, there's I believe 34, I'm talking off the top of my head, I could go get the budget, a $34,000 line item for contracted services and maintenance in your budget.
There is a $33,000 line item for contracted services. Every penny of that.
And maintenance.
Every penny of that is spent without, there is $894 spent last year for general supplies of maintenance and $872 spent in general maintenance. Other than that, it's electric bills, porta potties, every dime of the $33,000 was spent last year on specific line items that will not go away this year. There is no money. Now, the tree warden, that's great, that takes care of that particular problem.
But I would say in answer to your question, though, regardless of what the specific issue
Right.
is,
It's a
if the
general
rec
question.
commission has recommendations about expenditures that are outside of the budgets, whether it's capital expenditures or operating expenditures, then it needs to go through the Board of Selectmen, I suspect through the Recreation Director, but I'm not sure about that.
Right.
Definitely goes to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen will take a look at it and say, you know, can we fund it in our budget by moving things around? Can we fund it however, one way or another? And if not, and they recommend funding it, they can come to the Board of Finance looking for money, or they can not recommend funding it and wait till next year or find another way of getting it done. But that's the proper path, whether it's capital or whether it's just regular expense items they're not capital. Additionally, with the capital, we have a capital subcommittee that meets, it's only like twice a year, so it's not regular, but meets and it solicits capital requests. It's not, once it's on the list, it doesn't mean it's making the cut, it just, these are what the people want. The final cut of requested capital still goes through that same route that Reggie mentioned, so in case of recreation, it would go through the Board of Selectmen, and they would say, yes, we want to move forward with this one, recommend moving forward with this, and we don't want to move forward with this. So the Board of Selectmen will make the recommendations, but I think it's good if there's a significant amount of capital in one specific area. It's never a bad idea to have that person come to make the, pitch for it, the people that are closest to it, once the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen get behind it. So, and we did send out a request for information
Yes,
sometime in October.
yeah, late October, and unfortunately, our November meeting got canceled due to a small
Well, it's-
snowstorm.
The request is still out there, and somebody's gonna
So-
pick up on it, presumably in January. Alesia was the one that was heading that subcommittee, so at the next meeting, we'll see if we can appoint somebody else to that. So you might as well still be thinking
Oh,
about it.
definitely.
Because it's budget time,
Yep.
it's getting to be budget time now, so.
Thank you very much.
I just want to address the issue which you mentioned about parking lots or roofs to the cabin or whatever. Typically, what would have happened, at least in the past, the rec commission would have, or the rec director would have talked to the first selectman, the rec commission and the selectmen would have decided whether specifically on the side of the selectmen, whether there were funds available in the general government budget to fix that, say, damaged roof. Me, as a member of the Board of Finance, I'm speaking for myself, not for the full board, if you needed in an emergency situation, $2,000 in the middle of the winter to fix a roof, I would be willing to vote for it out of surplus. But it's gotta be a real emergency.
And that should go through the selectmen's to you, it should not come from the rec commission, correct?
The rec commission needs to make a decision on what to do,
Right.
all right? They need to go to the Board of Selectmen as a whole.
Right.
Then the Board of Selectmen comes with that recommendation for the additional funding to the Board of Finance. We make that, and if it's over $20,000, it has to go to town meeting.
Right.
That is the legal procedure.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Could I ask a question, because I'm not understanding how the process has come to this. There was a time when REC received $50,000 to take care of their capital needs. And I don't know if it was specifically for parks, and I was never quite sure of the details, but the Board of Finance gave them $50,000 a year to take care of any of these things that, I don't know, Dan, you know better than I do about that, but that $50,000 seems to have like been dropped from the budget, or?
Whatever budget
Uh-huh,
has been allocated to them
uh-huh.
have come through and been part of the Board of Selectmen's capital budget. And there's well more than $50,000 in budget for items that are recreation, depending on how one views recreation. Okay, but the budget is rather specific on what the items are.
Well, am I wrong then that I was understanding that every year they REC receive, I think it was Bill Baxter who started that, or am I wrong?
There's no automatic
was
budget
it-
allotment for.
But that
Yes.
was occurring, but what,
They were-
you know,
it was
with the
occurring?
entire
Okay,
economy and
all right.
everything, what came
Yeah.
about is that the capital expenditure committee made a decision that every dollar would be accountable for a specific project, not just a lump sum, and then it gets spent on anything that, in any
Oh,
department,
I
I'm not
understand.
picking on recreation.
Okay, no, okay, I
If
get
you have a
it.
project, it's gotta be listed in the capital expenditure budget and designated roughly for that project, or within the scope of, such as Brown's Corners or whatever.
Yeah, I hadn't understood that the capital subcommittee is the one who took that money in and.
It all came down to about
Yeah, yeah,
accountability,
okay.
not just from the
Yeah.
rec commission, it's
Yeah,
what are you spending the money on?
absolutely. Yeah, so
So-
in that case, might it be suitable, or might be appropriate maybe to think about, like is happening with the Board of Ed, where if there's money left over, capital money, they're allowed to keep it in an account to use? Or is it very
We already
different,
voted on
or is
that.
it a very different situation? I'm
For
saying,
capital money for education,
Yes.
we
Well,
decided to
would
do
it be
that last time.
appropriate
Didn't
to
we
do
make
it?
that motion? We did.
yes, you did, yes, and I think it's a wonderful idea, really.
Mhm.
Would it be appropriate to do the same thing for rec?
I think
So that they would have some money to.
there's really two buckets, there's town government and there's education. And we just started the education, it was just one called town government.
It's such a great idea.
But what it does is gives the flexibility to really use it for what people that are responsible believe it's needed for, and whether it's recreation or whatever it might be.
I think that already exists, Maria, to tell you the truth. I'll touch on that later on. when we get to
Yeah, no,
something.
Okay, hearing no more public comments, I'm gonna move on to the next agenda item, which is non-lapsing education fund subcommittee update. I'll turn it over to Reggie and Brian Kilty, we're working on that.
Okay, so it all started, I don't know if it was Alesia or whoever brought up that state statute. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass around some information on it to just bring people up to speed, to refresh some memories with one for the.
Thank you.
This is the state statute, and I'm passing it around, I'll read it to you real quick. It's section 10-248A. Kind of the general statute says, unexpended education funds account for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2011, and each fiscal year thereafter, notwithstanding any provision of the general statutes or any special act, municipal charter, home rule, or other ordinance, the Board of Finance in each town having a Board of Finance The Board of Selectmen in each town having no Board of Finance or to the authority making appropriations for the school district for each town may, and I like to highlight the word may, deposit into a non-lapsing account any unexpended funds from the prior fiscal year from the budgeted appropriation for education for the town, provided such amount does not exceed 1% of the total budget appropriation for the education for such prior fiscal year. That's right out of the Connecticut General Statutes. You want to read your letter that you sent to Ben? I have a copy of it here.
But I can just sort of paraphrase
Wanna
what
paraphrase?
my
I'll
thoughts
pass
were on
it
this. I
down.
mean, this was a statute that, it's brand new. It just came into effect for this past fiscal year. And basically what it is designed to do, although it has very little legislative history to go along with it, it allows for, as the statute reads, to roll over not more than 1% from a prior fiscal year to the following fiscal year. We as a Board of Education feel that this is a good statute to follow and a good account to set up because it promotes more efficient use of taxpayers' money with regard to spending money at an appropriate time. Whenever you have a budget that ends at the end of a given year and you have to close the books, you still may have contracts and stuff that you're still negotiating that, you're in the process of that, and instead of spending it before the end of the fiscal year, you can spend it more wisely later on. It also just generally promotes savings. Once again, if you have a budget, and this is true not just in New Hartford, but any municipality in the state and the country as well as elsewhere, is that if you're given a certain amount of money, there's usually not very much money left over. So what this will do is help promote savings and once again, more efficient use of the resources. And I think it's a better use of taxpayers' money, and we do support that this board set up such account.
In doing some research, Jim Fitzgerald and I had asked that Dan and Jerem contact the town auditors. A copy of the report I've passed out. Let's see, which was it, Christopher King, he listed some pros and cons as to what he felt about it. I'm trying to remember what's in here, because I read it a couple days, but long and short of it, he really left it up to the board to make a decision. So what I'd like to do is, so that we can open up discussion, I have a motion that I created for this, and at least get the subject on the floor so that we can talk about it. Motion in accordance with Connecticut General Statute, Section 10-248A, Unexpended Educational Funds Account for the New Hartford Board of Finance, approves the creation of an Unexpended Education Funds Account at the end of each fiscal year, and at the request of New Hartford Board of Education, the Board of Finance may transfer any unexpended funds from the Board of Education budget to the Unexpended Education Funds account. There's a motion.
I'll second it, but I have some concerns that are
I wanted
Mr.
to make
King's
sure the
concerns.
motion was made second, so we just get discussion going.
Okay, so discussion.
Well, I question, or I'm reading his comment about, it seems to me the establishment of a fund that allows the unexpended portion of an annual budget to reserve funds defeats the main purpose of an annual budget, and it's like the budget keeps going on and on and on. I'm not totally against it. This is the first I've read this, and the first I even knew what this was about, but that is a concern. And is it just the capital budget, or it's the whole budget, and how's that transferring to the
The
board?
capital budget carries over till the project is completed anyways.
Right.
At the year.
But that is new.
I'm not gonna speak for or against it, because I'm a little neutral on this right now, as the chairman of the subcommittee, and I wanna try and remain that way. I felt it was appropriate that I just gather the information, get a motion out there. The only thing that I would point out is that there is the word may in the motion, which to me means that we may or may not, if the financial climate is appropriate, transfer those funds if we as a Board of Finance feel it's appropriate at the end of that fiscal year. And that word may is right in the statute, as I'm trying to keep part on. try to stay as close to the statute and the motion as I possibly
So
can.
that leaves it in the hands of the Board of Finance each year to determine whether the excess money goes back in the general fund or in the educational account. So it takes the control of it away from the Board of Education.
But I think per the statute, and the fact that they use the word may transfer, leaves it to the Board of Finance every year to make that decision. I mean, that there could be, like I said, there could be some very tough financial times, which there are right now, where we decide that, you know, we need that money to stay in surplus so we can offset the next year's budget for educational costs or general government or whatever costs, period. But it is a request from the Board of Education, and we should keep discussing.
I have a question. This is the first time I've really looked at it too, and I'm just wondering, how would the, when the board is approached for extra money, like you were for the budget last year, where, Philip, you had the extra expense for the unexpected expense for the special ed student, and so the board allocated $29,000 extra on top of the budget for that. Would that be brought back into the picture when you're looking at unexpected funds, and whether to, I mean, would it be a situation where maybe that kind of initial outlay by the board, extra outlay, would be repaid before this, whatever is left that goes back, or how would that work into the whole picture?
Say almost certainly, it would be up to the Board of Finance to approve that extra request. I can't imagine approving it without knowing that they depleted that fund, because that's kind of what the fund is for.
Okay.
I just want to clarify that what happened last year, because I don't think that what was just said was represented accurately. The request that was made was to follow up on a grant that was given to the town that specifies what the use of the funds for, which were for excess special education costs. It was, according to the reading of the letter that came along with it, it was mandatory that if this money was here, if we proved that we had the need and met the prerequisites for it, it was to be given to us. So it wasn't like we were coming back for additional funds. We were following up on a grant that was specified for a specific use. I think there's a big difference there, so I don't want to mix those things together.
Yeah, I wasn't referring to that. Maybe I had the amount wrong.
Okay.
I was referring to the budget.
Only 20,000 was granted.
Yeah, I was referring to the budget, that when the budget was passed, it was at 0% increase plus the cost of a special ed student.
Yeah, I think they're totally separate matters.
Well, I mean, that's just extra money that was put out.
Regardless,
I just wondered how
I
that
think
would.
your point is,
you
if
know.
I understand it right, your point is there's a shortfall in the expenditures. There's a gap in what you have in your budget versus what you have to cover. And would that fund be depleted? And it would be, again, it would be up to this board to approve the extra funds so we could make sure it was depleted if we so chose. My bigger question is, what incentive does the Board of Education have if the Board of Finance may do this every year? Because you're coming down to the end of the year budget, it's taking out of their capable hands, and putting in our capable hands, which I'm sure you guys think our hands are capable as well when it comes to Board of Education money, as opposed to letting the Board of Education, you know, knowing that the Board of Education knowing that it's their money to, you know, to use prudently, and not wonder whether the Board of Finance is gonna approve it or not. I'd top off the oil if it were me.
No, I think that they, you know, I trust them enough to bring this forward myself, so I think that they need to trust the fact that we're gonna do a prudent review of it yearly, and if we find that it is again another fiscally tough year, we may or may not do it, but I personally will at least listen to you. I'm not, you know, I talked to you about this, Brian, as part of the subcommittee. I may or may not approve it year to year, but if there are sufficient reasons to do it, and we can afford to do it, I'm willing to support it.
I think one thing, I think, the talking of this whole thing is, for the moment, I think more form over substance. I don't see a lot of money left over anyway, so I mean, it's good policy, I think it makes sense, but in really practical matters, I don't see us really having much of an opportunity to come before you discussing this anyway. That being said, I do agree with you, Ben, that it does, and I understand the limitations because it's the wording of the statute itself, but it does take away some of the incentive if the idea is, you know, the last meeting right in the end of June, this money may or may not be there. But I guess that would have to go along with Reggie's thinking, which is basically, you know, the presentation has to be made and, you know, a compelling reason would have to be brought forward as to why you would go ahead and do so.
Having said that, discussions can be happening coming up to the end of the year, so you know where you stand. As you said, there's not much to talk about. It probably won't be for the foreseeable future. I don't see a harm in passing it. It doesn't mean that you can't change it later to may, to will, if you know, if they seem to be appropriate down the road.
If there's no money to put into it.
How much we're talking about this year? What's $83?
That's my point.
Yeah, we've used up our $83 worth already.
What
Yeah, but there have been years where I sent back in the $60,000.
I was going to say, what would it have
3 or 4
been?
years ago when there was a lot more money that we didn't spend.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said. I feel uncomfortable voting on this tonight because it's really more complex, and I think I want to digest it and make some phone calls and, you know, talk to some people before I make a decision on this. I would rather, if there's excess money, it be put in an account rather than you all of a sudden have to spend it before it's gone on things that you may not need. I mean, that makes more sense to put it in an account where it could be used for something that you do need. But I'm also concerned about this never-ending end of the budget part, and I really need to think about it.
Well, there's no sense of urgency on it, other than just to get it off the table, and with new people coming on this board, I have no problem at all tabling it myself.
Need the motion to table in a second?
I just have one other thing, just in terms of the, if I could,
Yeah, we know the number.
Kate, just a response to you, that, you know, there is checks and balances built in here, obviously, every year when you have to go through a budget cycle, and there's where, how much is left in this account, so it's, I don't think it's necessarily never ending and will always keep growing sort of thing, because obviously every year when there's a presentation from the Board of Education as to what the budget's gonna be, you know, that item's gonna be right there for people to look at and have discussion over, and so I don't see it getting to the point where it's gonna be, get out of hand.
No, I understand that, and I know where you're coming from on this. I just feel uncomfortable voting on it right now since I've just seen it for the first time.
And that's completely understood.
I don't know how you feel about
Right,
it. but
totally.
Completely understood, I just want to point that out though,
Right.
you know, but if you have any other questions
I would
about it,
give you
feel
a call.
free, feel free to call.
Thank you.
So do we have a motion to table the,
Well, first we have the vote and the second to put it on the floor, so what do we do with
I
that?
think parliamentary procedure-wise, a motion to table is a motion of precedence, and you can make that and have the original motion, it's on the table. Or if you would like, I'll withdraw my motion, someone will withdraw the original second.
I'll withdraw my second.
And there's no motion.
okay,
That's all that.
then
Will
we
we
can
revisit it
move
at
on,
the next meeting, or
and we're going
whatever?
to put it back in the next month or two on the agenda to revisit. Okay, thank you. Reports, Board of Education / Superintendent's report.
You go that way, Ben? You go that way. And here's some publics. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Philip O'Reilly, Superintendent of Schools here in New Hartford. For those new members of the Board of Finance, I want to reiterate, or I want to explain that the document that I'm sharing with you is one that was created from my office 6 or 7 years ago when I became superintendent. It is internal document. It is not. It is the purpose of this is for me to share with the Board of Education and the Board of Finance the financial standings. It is not the official bookkeeper's financial statement that's generated by Pat Housen every time she does a payroll and a accounts payable. So it's an internal document that I use to more closely monitor the line items. So I share it with you when I come to the meetings. and then I highlight any areas that I think are of concern in this budget cycle. The red, the total red at the end is just a addition of all those lines that are overdrawn. It does not mean that that's where we're going to end in the red. It is just a total of the lines that are at this point overexpended. So, and at a future Board of Ed meeting, as per our board policies, the board may transfer money from one line to offset those overages. This is a document that, when you see it, the Board of Education has already seen it. You won't see anything that the board hasn't already seen in a previous meeting. At this point, I have no specific concerns other than special education continues to be the challenge both this year and last year, and the costs that are to some extent uncontrollable because they are determined by, many of the costs that we incur are determined by PPTs, by special team meetings that call for services that we may not have known about last year. So that continues to be a concern of mine this year. And that was reported to the Board of Ed. Are there any questions about this document, this internal document that we use, and where we stand?
Can I ask you a question, Philip? You said your special ed continues to be a concern for you. At one of your recent Board of Ed meetings, there was something said where perhaps some costs have gone down with the movement of students out of the
It's a good point. Thanks for bringing it up, because I am concerned about special education. When we had a particular student who had a specific need moved out of district, I eliminated, which is historic in my tenure certainly, I eliminated a full-time tutor and a 40% of a teacher mid-year in order to help offset those special education costs that I know are growing. So it doesn't mean that we have less costs. It was a means for me to control some of the special education spending.
Thank you.
All right. That was the purpose of doing that, and as far as I'm concerned, that hasn't been done a long time. I mean, to actually mid-year eliminate positions, but we did make that. I did make that move. But the reason is that I'm concerned about special education and those growing costs. Any other questions?
How many outplacements do you have this year?
Well, we have 2 outplacements, but we have some partial ones, Kate, now. And I say partial ones in that we're in charge, or we're responsible for transportation out of the district, not the tuition. And that actually too, Kate, has changed and is fluid right now, because we have some situations where children have been outplaced and aren't as successful as maybe parents wanted them to be. So it has been fluid.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. I am happy to report to you, well, first of all, I want to thank your chair. I want to thank Ben Whitty for his advice and participation in the teacher contract negotiations, which as of this afternoon at 3:45 have been completed. The Teachers Association has approved a contract. The Board of Education at its last meeting approved the contract. And Ben was an integral part of that process. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you if you don't mind making a comment. But talking with Brian, I just want to highlight 4 key points of this new contract. Obviously, people are interested in salaries. This is a 3-year contract. An unprecedented move on the part of the New Hartford Board of Education. They have frozen the advancement of the step increases for 2 consecutive years. Year one is a solid freeze. That means there is no step increase from this year for teachers, and there will be no salary increase as well. So it's what we call a solid zero, is that the term we've used? 0% increase. In year two, there is no step increase, but there is the small 1.5% increase. And in year three, there is a 1.5% increase plus step. The net increase for the life of the 3-year contract is a little over 4.5%. Is it 5%?
5.5.
5.5, thank you. Along with that, so that's first.
Your step is 2.5%.
It's those are larger steps, larger increases, Dan. So that's the first piece. The second piece that the board attempted to control were the health insurance costs, and the board negotiated out the existing Blue Care Plan and the Century Preferred Plan to more managed care plans, one Century Preferred Plan and one high deductible plan, and then another buy down or lower cost plan. The cost shares for teachers and for the Board of Education will remain the same in the first year. The increase to teachers of 1% in year 2 of the contract, and the increase of an additional 2% in year 3 to bring at the end of year 3 up from what it is now 17% for teachers to 20%. So a net increase of 3% of cost share to the teachers. And what's the double bonus is those 3 optional plans that the teachers will choose from are all lower cost options that are on the table now, that they're using now. Because they're more managed care or they're the high deductible plans.
3.
I'm sorry?
They have 3, they'll have 3 plans.
They'll have 3 options from which to choose. The third one is, I call the Jim Fitzgerald clause, and that is cementing what we thought we had cemented relative to time. We have now an additional period of time for teachers working 2 additional after-school meetings per month, up to 4:30 each of those 2 additional meeting times. So we've actually successfully tried to do what we thought we did before. And then the last piece that we attempted to do, you know that I struggle each budget season with the notification of retirement and the fact that many retirement notifications come after the budget cycle, and I've budgeted for a higher cost teacher, and then that teacher may decide to retire. So what we have decided, or what we have negotiated, or what the board negotiated, was a February 1st notification for teachers if they're to get their personal day accumulation, I forget what we call it, the additional money that they get at retirement. So they have, in order to get it during this a particular fiscal year, they have to notify us by February 1st. So there's some other small language changes that we made, but those were 4 highlights, and so Ben, I'll ask you to comment and or clarify anything that I may have fumbled my way through here.
I guess what I would have to say is I certainly don't support the binding arbitration process that forces you to settle at something where you know when it goes to binding arbitration, here's what the settlements are, here's what you're gonna get. Having said that, there's too many different things involved in your own local situation that I just don't support the binding arbitration process. I do support the settlement that was made, okay? And I was an active part of the discussion, and they either listened to me or placated me, I'm not sure which, but it was a good exchange with all of us. I think the negotiating team did very well. Katie Natal did an excellent job of leading it. And there was lots of open exchanges. So I thought that the settlement was as good as it was going to get, okay? One other thing I don't think you said, but I didn't hear it anyway, was if the insurance, assuming an insurance increase of 5% a year, if the teachers stayed with the most expensive policy that's being offered now, we wouldn't see an insurance cost increase until year 3, I believe it is.
Right.
So if people go with the lower cost, but lower cost is what do you call it? Flexible spending, a health savings account. There's lower cost to the school district, and there's lower cost to the employees as well. So I mean, those are opportunities that people have that will even reduce the cost further for everybody. So I thought it was good. It's kind of hard to sit through some of those things and listen to things that are on the table for discussion. And you know, in a non-union situation, you just don't talk about those things when it comes to wage and salary negotiation. You're told what it's going to be, but I support the outcome. I think these people did a good job of doing what needed to be done, getting through the process, and getting the best deal they could for the town.
Is it possible that the contract can be emailed to the members of the Board of Finance so we can review it? Hearing about it for the first time, I'd like to read it first before I make any comments.
It's done, right? It's
By law, I have to post it in the town hall, in Donna's office, for 30 days. If you would like a request, do me a favor. I mean, if you'd like to have a copy of it, just send me an email.
Is it in the town clerk's office right now?
No, it has to be signed first, and
Okay,
then
well,
it'll be posted in the town clerk's
As
office.
soon as it's posted, can you email us a copy?
I
Or I will email you if you want me to, but
Yeah.
I'm making a request right now.
Okay. It's a public document, so yes.
Right.
Yep.
No, I'll glad to follow the procedure.
Okay. Any other questions about that? Did I forget anything? Was I?
I mean, no, I don't think you forgot anything. I think it's the type of thing that if you do a full analysis of what other districts are, which is really what this comes down to, you're gonna find out that this is a very favorable contract for this town. Some people may not see that until they've actually done that full analysis, but once you've done that, you'll see that this is a very favorable contract. And I also would just like to chime in by giving kudos to our team. I think we had a very strong team between Ben, Katie Fistatali, and Steve Tuxbury here, who really put a lot of time and effort into this to come up with this. We were at the door of becoming very expensive in terms of mediation and arbitration, which any costs of additional, I don't think there's any additional cost to be gained there, but even if they were going to be eaten up by the cost of actually going through those procedures. So I hope that everyone would look at the contract thoroughly, but you know, to do your full analysis, do some comparison and see where you end up.
The last thing I wanted to share with you, I think I've shared it with you, and that is the estimated revenues, and they're still only estimated. I know that you take a look at these in creating the budget, Ben, so this is a document I received several weeks ago, or a week ago, the 4th, that at this point our ECS entitlement is exactly what we had intended it to be or budgeted to be. And that I wanted to draw your attention. I'm not sure about the transportation grant, but I did want to bring you down to the excess cost grant, which is the 26.4, and that is that there was a little